Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. I am so excited once again to have an amazing guest on. Her name's Andrea Sorensen. Thank you for being here.
Hey, I'm excited to be here too.
Yes, we're live here at Wasatch Recovery, and Andrea has an amazing story. She lives her life with passion. I got to know her. We spoke at the same conference, but we kind of missed each other. But I've heard such great things about you. And people think the world of you. And I know you're really passionate about how you live your life, but it wasn't always like that. I know.
No.
You've dealt with addictions in your family, and I just can't wait to get to that. But I do want to also really quick thank our sponsor, Veracity Networks, for believing in me and allowing this to happen. And also you listeners, man, we are crank. I can't believe how many downloads we have received. So thank you for listening and sharing, and this is exciting. and everyone has an amazing story, and people love to hear this, and so I'm so grateful that you're willing to come on.
Thank you.
So again, like we said, you've dealt with some struggles with addictions in your family.
Yeah.
You sounds like you worked for the American Red Cross after 9/11 as a volunteer and focusing mainly on addiction issues with families and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, in recent months. So this endeavor of mine to reach out to this community and just offer whatever help I can, I guess, by sharing my story,
right,
is relatively new. So I just kind of, in the last several months, have just felt this drive, this impression, just this need to get out there and to share that story. And some of that has come from friends around me saying, sure, Andrea, you need to talk about this. And,
right,
others have come from really strong impressions. And so I'm trying to do that. And I don't really know what that looks like yet. But at this point, it's been a lot of connection with a lot of amazing people and has offered a lot of healing for myself. And the cool part is when you see the healing happen for them too.
Absolutely. Well, I know a lot of people have reached out to you. You've been on several podcasts now, and you got a following on social media. They're really loving what you're doing. And I want to point out you're a mother of 5.
Yeah,
is that correct?
crazy.
Yeah. Which is awesome in itself, and that's what an endeavor that is, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted you to come on because I know you have a story, and the listeners that follow this will really be inspired because a lot of them are in the position where they're going through something.
Yeah.
Whether it's the addiction, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether they feel hopeless and lost. I also want to point out, Andrea's very passionate about her faith, and she's going to talk a little bit about that as well. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah. And I just want you to feel free to share. And let's start, tell us a little about growing up and a little bit about your family.
Okay. So I grew up in a home with parents that really adored me. You just could feel their love, but I also grew up with parents who were struggling with some of their own demons and unfortunately turned to substance abuse to handle those. And so as a result, there were some things that my siblings and I were subjected to growing up that we literally had no control over. And so they were doing the best that they could to get through their situation and their struggles. And we were doing the best that we could to get through them as well. And so I want to make it very clear that there was definitely not an absence of love in my home. And despite everything that has happened over the years, I knew that my parents loved me.
Sure.
And there were moments in my life where I definitely had some anger and some resentment. But as the journey continues and various things happen to me that we'll hear about, I learned to replace that resentment with compassion and that anger with love. And that has enabled me to be able to heal and to lead like this really joyful life. Does it mean that I don't experience sadness or trials still? Absolutely not. But it means that I'm able to look towards hope always.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the situation growing up. My dad was an alcoholic. And during those early years, my mom was the rock of our family.
How old were you really quick when you realized that your dad was going through this? So how old were you at that time?
Okay. Well, obviously I knew that my parents drank and I knew that dad got pretty angry sometimes.
Okay.
I don't think it really kicked in, though, that it was a serious problem until I think I was in the 4th grade.
Okay.
I took my first dance class. My mom enrolled me in my first dance class, and I had my first dance recital.
Okay.
And I remember, gosh, I've never shared this story before, but you made me think of it. I remember being so excited that night for my family to see me dance on stage for the first time, right? And so I get out there, and my mother was there and my godparents, and my dad was supposed to show up at the end of work. And I remember dancing out onto the stage and looking out into the audience and seeing my brother and my sister and my mom, and then an empty seat next to her, and then my godparents.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was up there dancing, all I could think about instead of my first performance was, where's my dad?
Yeah.
What happened? And it was after the recital that we got home. And again, this is pre-cell phones. So we didn't know where Dad was. Right. We had no idea. It wasn't until we got home and later that night got a call from the jail that my dad had been arrested. And it was actually something unrelated to alcohol. But it was at that moment that I thought, Dad's got some challenges.
Yeah.
So I was 10. It's kind of a young age to realize. I mean, I knew before that things were off, but this was like the moment where I thought, okay, this is a real problem.
Well, and as a 10-year-old too, you don't know how to handle that information. It's almost like it, all of a sudden it feels like things aren't safe anymore.
Right.
Because you're 10. You don't know how to process that.
Yeah. And I never really felt very safe before. I mean, I talk about growing up in that environment as like walking on eggshells all the time. Like you were just so nervous. You didn't know if that day when Dad came home from work, if you were going to get happy, how are you, Dad? Or if you were going to get like really angry and belligerent, Dad. And so it was just this constant state of fear and this very tentative energy all the time of like being careful and worrying about the way that you said things. If I say this one way, is it going to be misconstrued? Or it was this constant state of fear. Yeah. So Mom was this light for our family. She was just this really fun, vibrant person, life of the party, but she was really struggling to pull my dad away from this addiction. And there was court-ordered AA meetings and abuse pills and different things like that, to help detox my dad from the drugs. Or for those of you that don't know, abuse, if you take that and drink alcohol at the same time, it makes you very, very sick. Right. And I remember once going with my dad to the pharmacy and watching the pharmacist watch my dad take the pill and then going back outside and watching him spit it out because he somehow hid it in his mouth. Yeah,
they call that cheeking.
Okay, there you go. I don't know the terminology. Yeah, or like seeing the booze, asking my dad asking me to hide them in my playhouse in the garage, or various things like that. Right. So these were the things I was experiencing as a kid.
Yeah. Wow. That's
tough. My mom tried desperately for years to rescue my dad, but she just didn't know how to do it. And he was very much like this functioning alcoholic. He held down a job most of the time. And, but there was just a beer from sun up to sundown all the time. Yeah. And the amount that he could drink and still drive or all of these other things was just crazy to me. Anyway, so Mom tries for years, and finally she can't handle it anymore. The contention, the anger in the home, the fighting, it was so intense that I remember when my mom said, we're going to get a divorce, I remember feeling relieved because at this point I thought, perhaps this will be the wake-up call that Dad needs. Right. Maybe things will finally change. Yeah. And so I had all this hope. So my parents get divorced and my mom tries to move on with her life. And meanwhile, my older brother, who's my half brother, goes and lives with his dad. He was about my brother's 4 years older than me. So when my parents divorce, he leaves and goes and lives with his father. And then it's just my sister and I, who are about 18 months apart. Okay. So we are trying to make sense of all of this. And function and figure out how to just live life the best that we can. And my parents end up with joint custody, so we spend 2 weeks with dad and 2 weeks with mom, and that in and of itself was kind of challenging, but we figured it out.
Yeah, sure.
And so mom seems to start getting better. She, just starting to function on her own, right? In this new life away from being with my dad. And she meets my stepfather, who is an incredible man. Love him. We have a great relationship to this day. They end up together, and nothing changes with my dad.
Yeah.
Things are still the same.
That's tough to see that nothing's changing.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No matter how much begging and pleading and whatever we do, it just stays. The status quo is the same. And so we learn to function in this. But what this kind of propels me to do is to seek for hope, seek for some sort of strength outside of what I've got within my own family. And so at this time, I start trying out different churches. I am seeking for some kind of peace.
Something, yeah.
I can't find it at home, so I'm going to seek for it elsewhere. And so I become a member of various faiths, and I just search, and I'm finding some sense of hope and some faith. But it takes a long time. And so I eventually find peace in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it really helped to strengthen me from that point on. But it wasn't an easy road getting there.
For sure, yeah.
And there was a lot of opposition to that. But that's what worked for me. That's what brought me some peace and some strength and just some guidance and direction that I needed as this really young teenager who didn't know where to turn. And so mom meets my stepdad. Things seem to be going really good for her. Yeah. I have finally found some religion that I feel like brings me some comfort. Yeah. And I start to notice that mom seems a little bit off.
Right.
And she those latter years of high school went from being this woman who would walk into a room of strangers and hug everyone in the room. Mm-hmm. I mean, and when you finished getting that hug from Debbie, you didn't want to let go, and you loved her right back, even if you were a stranger, and you did it because you could feel her genuine, unconditional love for you.
With her. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. She was this vibrant person. But I start noticing that something's a little off. So those late years of high school, I am trying to figure out what it is. I don't know if maybe she's suffering from depression. And then at this time, she has a baby. And so I have this awesome sister who's 15 years younger than me. So I'm 15 when she's born. And I think mom's probably just exhausted, right? She's 41 when she has my younger sister. And I mean, I'm 36 right now, almost 37 with 5 kids. And I can't imagine having another baby right now. So for all of you ladies out there who have a baby in your later 30s or even beyond that, kudos to you. Because that's exhausting.
Absolutely.
So I am thinking, I'm making up all of these excuses in my head for why mom is acting a little bit different. And this looks like sleeping more than she used to, or not just kind of being numb.
Yeah.
Not really as engaged as she used to be. And so I'm worrying about this, and I'm worrying about my dad, and I am trying to pick up the pieces of my own life and move on. And I have this experience. Now, at this time, I am, in addiction support and addiction recovery, we talk about victimhood a lot.
For sure.
And I experienced this not as an addict, but just as a family member who is being subjected to the effects of the addiction of a loved one, right? And so at this time, I'm kind of playing victim because I am seeking for healing. I'm seeking for love and for sympathy and for attention from the people around me. And so I am thinking, surely if I wear my trials on my sleeve, then people will feel bad for me.
I'll get some sympathy.
I will get some attention. I will get some sympathy. And so, not that I was out there broadcasting it to the world. In fact, I've spoken to some people that I've run into from high school since then that will say, I had no idea
clue, really.
what you were going through at this time. And so, but to my close friends, I was laying it all out there all the time, and to myself, right? I was like, it was a woe is me mentality. Poor me. I have it so hard. I have it so hard. Yeah. And so I show up to church one day, and this is probably, I don't know, 3 months or so after I initially start consistently attending church. And I sit down, and the opening hymn that day is Families Can Be Together Forever. And I cringe. I cringe. I hated this song.
You're like, I don't want to hear this.
I don't. No. And I swear to you that is the song that was played every Sunday. And I felt like I couldn't get away from it. Yeah. I felt like God was taunting me with this song. And so here I am, victim Andrea, sitting in the pew and just thinking to myself, I am sitting here without a family in this very family-centered culture. Yeah. And I am not understanding my place here. And like, do I even fit in here? And I'm listening to this song, and all I can think is, I hate this. This song is about everything I don't have. And then the second verse starts. And mind you, I've heard this song a million times, okay? The second verse starts. And all of a sudden, I receive this impression. It was like I had this light bulb aha moment. It was like somebody flipped on a light switch, and my life was illuminated after this moment. Right. Because I hear the words "can be" in the song. And it was the first time that those two words had ever really stuck out to me. Right. And I latched onto that, and I thought, wait a minute. This song about families being together forever doesn't have to be about everything I don't have. Yeah. But instead, this song can be about everything that can be. Wow. This gets to be about everything that I can have. Right. And I get chills even when I think about it, because that is a moment for me where I realized the power of choice. And the power that taking control of your life and just deciding, no, I might be subjected to these circumstances, to this fear, to this anger, to this frustration, to this lack of safety within my home on a daily basis. But the ball's in my court. Yeah. I get to decide what can be for my life. Oh, that's awesome. And from that moment on, I lived my life very intentionally. I would look at a choice placed before me. I was a teenager. I was 16 years old. So I had many more years ahead of me of making decisions, right? And going, is this going to help me towards my can be goal, or will this keep me trapped in my current situation? And I kind of just started to pit everything against that belief that I had this power to choose and this power to create.
Did you feel like it was taking you out of that victim mentality?
Oh,
like you
in an instant. Yeah. In an instant.
Because now you kind of go, well, I'm in charge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I joke when I give a public speech or whatever, I talk about this, and I say, you know, before it was like, in high school, they make you read the Scarlet Letter, right? And so, which I was an English major. I love it, right? Sure. Many don't. But in the Scarlet Letter, she's forced to wear this letter A for adultery on her chest. And it was like I was choosing to wear this V for victim. Like I was walking around in this ugly dollar store T-shirt with a big letter V on it. Right. When the whole time, I could have been glamming it up in something from Target or right? Sure. Like it was me. I was the one who was choosing to wear the victimhood. Wow. So it changed everything for me.
Well, and to have that experience, because you're still fairly young,
I'm 16. I'm 16 at this point.
And most kids at that time don't even recognize they're being the victim. Yeah. You know, so for you to have this experience, at really a young age, it's amazing.
It was a blessing. Yeah. I really believe, again, this goes back to just my faith. I believe that God knew that I just needed hope. Yeah. I needed him to shared this moment with me, right? And I think he knew too that I wanted it so deeply and that I was willing to do whatever I could, but I needed that I needed that shift in my perspective. And I really believe that was divinely given to me, and I'll be forever grateful for that moment for the rest of my life, right? So I wasn't being taunted with that song. I feel like it was God saying, I'm playing this song every week, so you'll finally get it. Right?
Hello.
Yeah. So that was up to me.
That's awesome.
That was up to me.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's talk about so things started to change for you.
Yeah.
And how did that affect like even the way you viewed your family? Obviously your mom's struggling, you got a dad who's still struggling. How did that play into that, and what happened there?
Okay, well, that piece of the puzzle takes me a little bit longer to heal from.
Right.
So for myself,
which is understandable.
Yeah. So for myself, it was, I still had anger towards my dad and this situation from growing up, and I still didn't understand. I would say compassion is something that I've never struggled with, so I was always able to kind of recognize like he's emotionally struggling and this is what he's turning to numb himself.
Right.
So fortunately, I feel like I was able to recognize that, but I still couldn't let go of the anger that I had with why can't he choose me over the substances?
Right.
And then later that happens with my mom. So as I mentioned, in high school, I'm noticing this change overcoming her, and I don't know what to do about it. Meanwhile, I'm experiencing this like light being poured into my life because I am seeking for it. Again, I'm intentionally living so that I can change my life, so that I can break this cycle that I feel like I've been stuck in. Right. And so after I graduate from high school, I feel really impressed to not attend college right away, but I apply for AmeriCorps and CCC, which is the National Civilian Community Corps, which you mentioned a little bit in my bio. But I ended up getting accepted, and it's kind of a rigorous application process. But I do this because, again, I feel really compelled to do this. I am trying to, again, break this cycle and get out of this this environment. And I remember praying and just asking God, okay, what do I need to do next? I was very focused on me, like teens are, right?
Yep.
What do I need to do next to create this can-be situation?
Right.
To create this life I want. And in my mind, I was thinking that means college applications, and the answer that I got was go serve. And so I think, okay, well, I'll take a leap of faith here. And I apply, I get in, and I report to AmeriCorps 2 weeks after 9/11, which was a crazy time. And it was a transformative year for me. I show up and I spend that year just working with various nonprofits around the country. I was able to do work with Habitat for Humanity and like you mentioned, the Red Cross and the school systems. And I'm not saying all of these things to say this is what Andrea did. I'm saying this because it was, like I said, I use that word transformative. It was really critical to help me recognize that, again, I do not have to be all of these things that were happening to me. And I am not limited by these things that are happening to me. I needed to realize from that experience that despite feeling like I didn't have anything to give, despite this brokenness that I felt, that I had a lot to offer. And that putting myself out there and answering that call to go out and serve, even though I thought, well, what do I have to offer? I'm really broken. I've grown up in this situation. How do I help these people? That despite that I felt like God was like, no, go do this. And you're going to realize what you have to offer. And the confidence that I gained that year was tremendous.
I can imagine,
And I realized, and I saw some really beautiful things happening, because every time we would go and serve different groups of people, and some of them who were part of the homeless demographic or whatnot, I would see these people who you would look at and make judgments and think they are broken. And yet every time without fail, I would see this light in them. And I would talk with them or hear of their stories and their experiences. And I was profoundly affected by how good people are, even people who are in the most dire of circumstances and who are struggling from whatever current experience they're having. It was a life-altering year to be able to, number one, see that even though I felt broken, I still had something to give. And all of these people that I was serving that sometimes felt broken themselves still had light to offer. And it was just this beautiful moment where I thought, wow, this is how God sees all of us, right? This is how you, whatever it is that you believe, your higher power or whatever, just this overwhelming feeling that we're all God's children. We all have light. We all have this vibrancy to offer. And we just need to remember that it's there. So.
Oh, I love that. Very beautifully said. And I agree. Some people even call it energy. And I'll always say, well,
absolutely.
Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be suppressed or magnified.
Yes.
By the way we think. And so, like you said, when we're caught up, whether it's an addiction or you're just playing the victim, we are suppressing the energy or the light that's within us. And yet the light's still there. It's not destroyed. It's there, but once we start breaking out of the victim stance, we get over an addiction or a depression or anxiety, that light starts to shine. And so
I love that. I love that thought.
And for you to do that and see that, as you're serving other people, what a great gift for you.
I think it was really cool. And it helped later with the compassion and the healing and getting rid of that resentment with my parents.
And I want to point something out that you said earlier. You said, obviously, when you were younger, you started feeling some resentment and some anger, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
And I loved what you said because the opposite of resentment was what you said is compassion. Mm-hmm. Because resentment breeds rebellion. And the antidote for that is compassion. And so instead of being mad and hating this person, I now have compassion for you. Yeah. And therefore the resentment goes away, rebellion stops.
Absolutely.
So I love that you said that and I wanted to make sure our listeners caught that when you said that earlier. I thought, wow, that was powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I come back from this experience feeling more confident than I ever have in my life because I realized just using my time can change a life. I wasn't doing anything grand or it was just recognizing that, hey, whatever I have to offer can help. Sure. And that was incredible. And I always, always, always got more back than what I gave. Wow. And so I come back super excited about where I'm going and what I'm doing for my future. And for the first time in my life, I finally feel free of my dad's addiction. I finally feel, and my mom's. At this point, right before I leave for AmeriCorps, I start to realize that what I think is going on is something to do with pain pills. And at this time, this is late 90s, early 2000s, and the education about opioid addiction just was not there. So we kind of knew that maybe something was going on with prescription drugs. Right. But we just weren't educated enough to know what that was. And I think there was definitely some denial there too, right? We're watching mom's light kind of slowly diminish and we don't know how, we don't know why, we don't know how it started. And so we're just kind of tiptoeing around the issue. Unfortunately, and again, that's another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I just feel like that age-old cliche, like knowledge is power, right? And I look back and think, wow, I wonder how things would have turned out if back then I would have known how addictive opioids were, or if my mom and I or my family and I would have had more education surrounding that. So thank goodness the culture is changing, the shame is lifting, and we're seeing so much.
Yeah, people are willing to talk and express, and I'm struggling. Yeah. And they're opening up.
Yeah, and we can't heal unless we're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And that process can't start without that vulnerability. So I'm just so grateful to see that movement of vulnerability happening in our culture right now. And it just brings me so much hope.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I get back from that experience, and I had finally felt free from all of my parents' addictions and all of that pressure that trying to support a loved one that's trapped in that trial brings into your life. And I meet my husband and I get married, and I am thinking to myself, whew, I've made it to the top of Mount Everest. I've broken the cycle.
Sure.
I'm going to start this forever family.
Yeah.
I am starting to live in that can be, right? Like I'm making it happen.
Yeah.
This is coming to fruition. And about 6 months after that, I'm not at the top of Mount Everest. I realize like everything comes crashing down, and I feel like I'm at the bunny hill again, because this is the moment that my mom's addiction finally becomes public.
Oh, okay.
So my dad has this house fire. My husband and I were married in July. My dad has a house fire in February, and he sustains 3rd-degree burns on his hands.
Oh, wow.
And this moment for my dad is like his rock bottom. Does it cure him of his addiction? No. But it makes him a little more gentle, a little more calm, a little less angry,
Right.
a little more contemplative.
Sure.
And so we start to develop a good relationship. Dad sustains these burns, and my mom, a couple weeks after that, comes over to bring him a casserole, which was very strange in and of itself, because after their divorce, it was a really bitter divorce. They had no relationship at all. And so this was kind of surprising.
Right.
So she brings him this casserole, and he calls me later and says, Andrea, your mom brought me this casserole, but what she did was still my morphine pills. And so that's when we know, okay, that's when the denial goes out the window.
This is real.
And I think, okay, this really is real. Mom really does have a prescription drug addiction. And what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I am broken.
Yeah.
I'm feeling broken at this
again.
time
Exactly.
because Mom was my light.
She was the rock back when you were
oh
going
my
through
gosh,
it as a kid.
she was. She
And
was
now
the
this
only thing that
rock
got
is
it.
going,
Right.
Yeah.
It was so strange to have my parents almost reverse roles. I mean, my dad still was and still is unfortunately struggling with his addiction. But now Mom was gone too. My worst fears, all those fears in those later years of high school, when I noticed something happening to her, they were coming true. And so we confront her. Again, not knowing how to approach this. I had zero education on addiction support, on what to do. And so I think, okay, we'll take her. We can't afford an expensive rehabilitation center. I had no resources. I had no idea where to go or what to do. And so we confront her, and at first she denies it, and then she breaks down and admits what's been going on, and then tells us that it's been happening since a knee surgery that she had when I was 14. So she kept this opioid abuse secret all through high school and was still functioning fairly well until this time.
Right.
So we take her to a detox center, and I naively think, awesome. Like, we're finally out in the open. She knows now, like, what has she got to lose? She's going to go through this detox center, and we're going to get Mom back. And then what that leads to is just this continuous cycle of years of opioid abuse, detox center, opioid abuse, detox center, opioid abuse. Can't get the opioids anymore because she had exhausted all of her resources to alcohol and opioid abuse. And this was excruciating to watch.
Right.
I spent so much of my time and my energy focusing on rescuing my mom that unfortunately some things were being neglected. I wasn't able to be the wife and the mother that I wanted to be to my husband and to my children because my thoughts were always on my mom. And, this looked like Mom calling me 10, 15, sometimes 20 times a day. And sometimes she would be coherent and other times she wouldn't. And instead of me learning how to set boundaries, I just, how can I help you? How can I rescue? Let me listen to this problem. And it just wore me down.
Right.
It just wore me down. It sapped all of my energy and I was devastated. I would get in the shower every night and sob because I was trying to hold it together in front of my husband and my kids and be this counselor to my mother, and was always worrying about my dad. And it was just this heaviness all the time. Yeah. And sure, I had my religion that I could rely on and that really helped me, but there was so much more that I needed to do on top of that. And the first thing was letting go of this, I need to rescue my mother mentality, and really learning how to set healthy boundaries. Yeah. And it took me a long time to get there, because I've always been this go-getter, right? Yeah. Like, I'm that type of personality.
I can tell. I love it.
That if I want something, I'm really determined. Sure. And I do everything in my power to go out there and I make it happen.
Yeah.
And this was the first, my parents are the only thing in my life that I've not ever been able to tackle and fix. Yeah. And that was really hard for me to learn how to let go of that and understand that that was not my responsibility. And right. So what that looks like is Mom, when she got really, really bad, she ends up ostracizing everyone in her life. Unfortunately, my younger sister, she was 15 when, I was 15 when she was born. And so she was born a year into my mom's opioid addiction, and just had my mom as this closet addict and then open right. addict for all of her upbringing. And that was a huge trial and challenge.
I can imagine.
So we're all just trying to function around this, and Mom ostracizes everyone in her life, and she ends up homeless. And at this point, she's living out of her car. She tries to commit suicide and takes herself to my brother's house. She had slit her wrists. Oh, wow. My brother finds her, takes her to the hospital. They save her. She is in the psychiatric ward at the hospital for quite some time. And then when they release her, I decide that's it. Again, I'm still in rescue mode. I'm going to take Mom. And my husband and I decide we will be Mom's rehabilitation center. So we bring her into our home.
Really?
Well, because the alternative was homelessness. Yeah. Now, please know that my stepfather at this time had done everything that he possibly could. Right. He would have taken her back into his home, but it just wasn't appropriate with my younger sister still there. Sure. And that was a healthy boundary that he set.
Yeah. And good for him, because as hard as that is, I mean, that you get to that point, that's the most appropriate boundary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was, sorry, I'm getting emotional. I just, I never pictured my mom homeless. Yeah. I never, it's so, when I see somebody on the street now, it's so different.
Yeah, you see it differently.
I totally do. I think that's somebody's mother, father, sister, brother. And I have that compassion, right? So Mom comes into our home, and my husband and I decide we are going to rehabilitate Mom. And so we take every resource from her for any prescription medication that she had been, anything. We take all of it away. She has no phone, no car. We're living in Seattle, Washington at the time. So she literally knows no one. She is trapped in our home because I am convinced that if I get Mom's head clear, if I take away all of the substances, that she's going to choose me, that she's going to choose to be sober. So we get her there after 2.5 weeks of detoxing, which was insane.
Oh, yeah, for
sure. It was insane.
Yeah.
And again, I have 3 kids at home, and I'm trying to do all of this on my own. I get Mom sober. And I am so excited. And for the first time, my kids are finally around her and getting to experience what Grandma Debbie is like. And I'm just so thrilled. But the difference was that Mom was sober and not clean. Right. And Mom was not choosing this sobriety for herself necessarily.
Right.
And it was this forced sobriety.
Yeah.
There's a quote by a leader in my church that his name is Richard G. Scott, and he says, okay, now it's slipping my mind. What does he say? Do not attempt to override agency. The Lord himself would not do that. Forced obedience yields no blessings.
Wow.
And that's powerful.
Yeah.
Right?
That kind of just puts it right in its place.
It does. And that's exactly what I tried to do.
Sure.
And it was good intentions. It was well-meaning, but I tried to force that sobriety. I tried to force that obedience on my mother. And that was taking away her power to choose. And a few minutes ago, I talked about with you how that power to choose what could be is what finally gave me the strength to like move forward in my life.
Right.
I was taking away that opportunity for her to choose what could be for her life.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that because it's that choice.
Yep.
And us making that and us learning to be intentional and take action, that's what empowers us. That's what strengthens us.
Sure.
Right?
Love it.
I took away that opportunity from her.
Yeah,
well-meaning, but I took it away.
Right.
So we realize, my husband and I are very aware of the fact that, like, yeah, mom's sober, but not clean yet, if you will, right?
Yep,
She's not wanting this for herself. She's trying. She's doing the best that she could. And I cherished those 3 months that we had with her in our home. It was the first time since probably my junior year of high school that I really felt like I was able to kind of connect with mom a little bit more again. 'Cause she was mostly there. She was free of the substances, but the passion to change wasn't in her yet.
Right.
So we offer for her to live with us. We say, why don't you stay permanently? Maybe even for a year. It can be longer if you want. We will help you get a job. Let's help you get on your feet. And she says no. And I'm devastated.
Yeah,
I'm devastated because I thought for sure she would do this.
Yeah.
She says no and says, I want to go back to Utah and I promise I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fine. And I know this.
You can tell that.
So
this is gonna lead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I take her to the airport and I am more sad than I've ever felt in my whole life. Because I know that I'm about to lose her again.
Yeah. And
I remember just before I let her go through the security gate, I remember receiving this really strong impression that says, this is the last time. And it was that this was the last time you're going to see her sober. And so I remember being really upset. But then I remember thinking, okay, like, don't throw this moment away. And so I look at my mom and I take her face between my hands and I say, Mom, I love you.
Wow.
And I need you to know this. And I've always loved you and you've always been enough for me and you've always been enough for God.
Wow.
And I hugged her. And I didn't want to let go, but I did.
Right, yeah.
I watched her turn around and walk away. And that was the last time I ever saw her sober. It's hard. It's really hard to see someone that you care for so deeply, someone that was so vibrant.
Right.
And touched so many lives just by being her. Her spirit was powerful.
Yeah.
To see her enslaved by the chains of addiction.
Right.
Was just brutal. And it lasted for so long. So she goes back to Utah and never recovers. We since we moved back here about a year and a half ago, I guess it'll be 2 years in January.
Right.
And so so this happens. I put her on the plane. She leaves. We moved from Seattle to Charleston, South Carolina, and we spent 5 years there. And I remember coming home after that experience. I remember crying like I've never cried before on my way back from the airport to my house. And I remember being so angry with God. Right. I remember yelling at him and just saying, I tried to save her. Right. I tried to rescue her. I did everything that I could. Mm-hmm. What more do you want from me? And that's when I realized it wasn't my job to rescue. Yeah. It was just my job to love. And that's when I realized I need to start to set boundaries so that I can be a better wife and a better mother and live my own life, pursue my dreams and the things that I wanted to do, which I hadn't been doing because all of my time was taken up in this rescue effort. Yeah. And so I finally begin to set boundaries. And for this 5 years that we're living in Charleston, South Carolina, I am feeling the best I felt in my whole life. Right. Because I had learned, yes, mom was still an addict. Dad was still an addict. And that was still super painful. And did I still bawl my eyes out in the shower at night? I did. I was still sad, right? Yeah. However, I had learned to set boundaries. And I started thinking of my mom's addiction as like this weather pattern, right? Like she had this cloud of addiction hanging over her. And I let that weather be my weather too for so many years. And what I failed to realize that the sun was there behind the clouds the whole time. But I was so focused on mom and her weather pattern that I failed to realize that the sun was waiting there to shine for me. Yeah. And so I figured out how to be in that good weather and how to let that cloud of addiction not hang over me anymore either. And it was great. Those boundaries were set. I learned to just show her love. I learned how to keep the phone calls to maybe just a couple of times a week instead of 15 times a day. Right. And I was still sad. Sure. But I held on to hope that we'd get her back, right? I'm going to set these boundaries. I'm going to approach this in the healthiest way that I know possible. And I finally learned to be okay. I started looking to addiction recovery and support programs and doing research and just learning some healthier ways of thinking so that I could be okay. Right. And so we then moved back to Utah. And that was in January of 2018. Okay. And in June of 2018, I get a phone call at 4:00 in the morning that my mother has been found dead. Wow. And I don't believe it at first. Sure. It's interesting when you experience that kind of trauma, how your body can like take over. And I literally was in denial. I remember I was in bed with my husband and I'm on the phone and I'm asking my sister over and over again, are you sure? Are you sure? Have you actually seen her body? And she tells me no. And so I say, well, then I don't believe it. I'm going to go and I'm going to find out for myself, but they have to be wrong. So I really am in denial. And I remember holding my husband and I remember half of me was saying, this really is it. And then the other half was, no, this isn't. And I remember
that tug of war going on there.
Yes. I remember, I remember like hitting him. He was hugging me. And I remember I was like beating my husband in the back and just, it was so raw. Wow. Yeah. I hopped in my car. I had my, foot on the gas pedal all the way to the floor and I drove from Layton down to Kearns and I got there and I saw the police tape and they came out and told us what had happened and I still didn't believe them and I spent the next 3 hours, they wouldn't let us go in. And then they asked us to come in and identify her body and I remember looking at my mother there, lifeless, and feeling so defeated. And, I talk about driving home from the airport that day. Yeah. And how I was angry with God and just trying to piece this all together. And I thought I was angry, then I was really angry this time. Sure. And in those days after her death, I Thank you. He just gave me a tissue.
Yeah, a little pause there, but yeah, there you go.
I remember feeling like just the love from my community around me, from my neighbors and my friends, and to me that was a manifestation of God's love. That was him saying, "Hey, I'm still here. I know you think like I've ignored you, but I'm still here."
Sure.
And that was manifest in all of the people around me. And yet I stepped away. I stopped praying, and I did this because I was angry. I thought, you know what? I did everything that I was supposed to do. I set boundaries. I was living my life in this healthier place. And yet this is not the outcome that I predicted. Because that whole time I was setting those boundaries, I thought, okay, mom has to choose this for herself.
Yeah.
So what this is going to look like is I'm going to show forth this excess of love with those boundaries in place. Yeah. And then eventually mom's going to choose. I had this whole fairy tale in my mind, which isn't a fairy tale. A lot of people recover.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that I'm speaking to that, because I don't want people to think I'm sharing this story of this loss to addiction as that's the way it's going to end up for you or your family members. I'm sharing this because even despite the loss, I have felt so much hope.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this to raise awareness. So, so I'm angry and I step away, and then finally I think, Andrea, what are you doing? You know what you believe. Yeah. You know there's this higher power, this light or this energy that you believe in that keeps you going. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I finally decide to come back and approach my God in prayer. And I kind of think I was afraid to do this because I knew that as soon as I did that he would put me to work.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So I remember saying this prayer, and just for the first time, I finally let him have it. I poured out my heart and just said, why did she have to die? Why did the story end this way? Why was this my ending? This is not the ending that I felt I was promised. Why did you let me down?
Right.
And I immediately got this answer and felt impressed and heard the words, "This isn't the end."
Wow.
And it was one of those perspective changing moments yet again.
Yeah.
And since that time, it has been impressed upon me that this is how her journey was supposed to end here on this earth. But I believe in heaven, and I believe that my mother is there, and that she is healing there. And I know this because I have felt her working through me. And so since that time, I have received some really strong impressions that I needed to start to share this story. And I was very apprehensive to do so. I didn't know what that looked like. I was afraid that if I started to share on a public format, that people would think that I was somehow trying to use my trauma to get attention. Right. Or there's all these things that go through your head that you worry about. Right. And I'm sure there are probably people that think that.
Right.
But I don't care.
Good.
And I've come to this place where I don't care because I know what I'm supposed to do. And I know every time I've shared what has happened, that I have healed and that I've helped somebody else heal.
You're helping me right now, honestly. Seriously.
Thank you.
I mean that. Wow. And I'm glad you are willing to share.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
I do. I believe that I believe our journey is not through, and it's been confirmed to me over and over and over again. These last several months that I've decided to start going out there and sharing on this public format. Yeah. And I remember I remember the very first big speaking event I had. I was speaking at a women's conference for our church. And I remember being up there and feeling her spirit come upon me and feeling her speak through me. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. You were right, God.
Yeah.
Like, her journey wasn't over. This is what she was supposed to do. And so I feel like we're doing this together. And maybe you think I sound crazy. But
no, that's powerful.
But I've seen the way that this connection and sharing these experiences has helped. And through all of this, I've learned that we heal through our shared experiences and that we heal through connection.
Yeah.
And I'm witnessing this happen all the time. I've finished speaking events, and I had one sweet woman come up to me, and she lost her son to opioid addiction. And I've had others come up to me and say, I have a spouse or a child that is going through this, and thank you for telling me that it's okay. Thank you for helping us to shed the shame as a family, and we're going to move forward with this now and be vulnerable and seek the help that we need. And so that right there is enough to keep me going, because there are times where I feel
for sure
drained, or it's not easy. It's not easy to share this, right? It's very vulnerable for me.
So vulnerable, but so needed.
But I won't stop.
I know.
I won't stop.
Well, and that's what I love about you, and that's why I had you on, because I love your passion, and I love that you I heard once actually at the Utah State Prison, where an inmate said, if you don't own your story, it will own you. And
it's profound.
You're just owning it, and you're just like, here it is, and I'm going to go share it, and I'm going to make a difference in this world.
Yes.
And hopefully help, someone who might be going through the same thing.
Yeah. It's, I was talking a little bit about on my blog the other day, just about this idea of our trials being like visitors, right? And they come knocking on our doors, and we can choose to not open the door and to turn them away, but they keep coming back. And it's not until we open the door and we welcome them in and we lean into the pain and we lean into that trial, right?
Yeah.
That then we can send the visitor away.
Yeah.
And then we can put that trial behind us. Or maybe we even take that trial and we put it under us, and then we stand taller than we have before because of that, right?
Yeah, right.
But we can't ignore the grief. We can't ignore the trial. We can't ignore the pain. We have to greet it. We have to welcome it in. Yeah. And we have to let ourselves feel all of those feelings as they demand to be felt. Yeah. Because if we don't, they just keep coming back and they keep creeping up. But when we do that, we start to heal. Yeah, and it's really cool.
Very well said. That makes a lot of sense, what you just said there, and a good way to look at it. Yeah. If someone's listening to this right now who, just maybe in that hopeless place that, you found yourself in several times through this, what advice could you give them right now if they're just kind of like, I feel lost, I feel like there's no point? What would you tell them right now?
I think the most important thing for us to realize is that we are enough exactly as we are, even if that's in the midst of an addiction or in the midst of whatever shame it is that you're carrying or you're feeling. That the first step, I feel like, is realizing that you are a being of power and a being of strength and a being of purpose, and you have so much to give and to offer despite whatever it is that you're carrying right now.
Right.
And that I don't want you to give up, because you are needed. Your voice is needed. And whether that is that you believe that God has a purpose for you, or you just believe that there's an energy that you have to give or something. You are enough. You don't have to be fixed before you can make a difference. And you don't have to be perfect before you can make a difference in someone else's life. And you don't have to be perfect before you can change too.
Yeah.
When I sat there that day in church listening to that song, I was the victim, right?
Yeah, right.
And I left that church meeting still with the same trials.
Right.
Still the exact same person as I was when I walked in. But the difference is I realized that I had control and that I could make my future whatever I wanted it to look like, despite the fact that I was still going to walk in the same doors. I'd have the same home and the same parents with the same problems.
Yeah. Wow. You know, looking back on what you've been through, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to kind of push you into a direction with this question.
Sure. Yeah.
I get the feeling you're grateful this all happened.
I wouldn't change
a
thing. There's not a day that goes by that I don't miss my mother.
Sure.
Or I don't grieve over the years of lost opportunities for my father.
Right.
And yet, everything is as it should be, because perspective and experiences are what give us empathy. And empathy is what provides us with an opportunity to embrace that power and that light that's in us.
Yeah, wow.
Right?
Very well said.
So no, gosh, do I wish I had her back? You bet.
Sure, yeah.
You bet. But I wouldn't change anything. And I know that Mom wouldn't change it either.
Yeah.
Just because we all have a purpose. And I really believe in that.
Yeah.
I really believe in that.
Well, you know, as I'm hearing your story here, and I'm just very inspired and very touched, you know, what price would we pay to have true compassion for other people? Well, like, what's that worth? And look what you had to go through, but now you have, you know, I'm sure you're always a nice, compassionate woman, but I mean, you have it such on a deeper level than, you know, there's no other way you could have gotten it.
No.
You know, and that's what I feel as you're sharing this, man. I feel such that deep compassion you have, not only towards what happened, but even towards what you're doing now and making a difference.
Right.
It's so cool.
Well, I feel it's the only way that we've really learned how to experience what real unconditional love is.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
You have to get through that first.
Yeah.
You don't gain that perspective without the experience, right?
Sure.
And it's in those moments that you have to dig deep and learn what it is that's important for you. And for me, it was learning how to cling to the Savior.
Yeah.
And not to the trial.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what works for me.
It helped you. Well, that's you being believing and faithful and grateful and all that stuff versus the victim.
Yep.
Because when you hold on to the trial, that's me playing the victim.
It is. And the trial becomes who you are.
Yeah.
It becomes everything that you are. Wow. It's your identity, right?
Yep.
You have to decide that you don't want your identity to be the hardest and darkest things that you've faced in your life.
Right.
Who wants that? Nobody.
Yeah.
But if you keep focusing on that, that's exactly what you're going to get.
I love that.
So good. Another church leader of ours, his name is Russell M. Nelson, and he says, the joy that we feel has little to do with the circumstances of our lives and everything to do with the focus of our lives.
Love it.
So where are you going to place your focus? Are you going to place your focus on all the bad stuff?
Yeah.
All the things that you've had to endure?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to feel joy?
Yeah.
And if you do, you've got to place your focus on all the good and all the light.
Boy, so well said. It reminds me of the quote, where attention goes, energy flows.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
So beautiful. If someone wanted to, reach out to you and maybe thank you for your story and maybe ask you a question or who's struggling or find your blog, how would they do that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a website. It's Andrea Jean Sorensen with an EN.
Okay.
.com. So you can look me up there. I'm also on Instagram at Andrea Jean Sorensen, and I'm on Facebook at Andrea Jean Sorensen. So I tried to keep it easy on all the social media platforms. It's all the same. So you can reach out to me there. There's contact links, or if you'd like me to come and speak at an event about addiction recovery, or at a church event, I would love to connect with you, because
that's awesome.
I heal. Yeah. I heal so much every time I do that too. And that's my favorite part of this is, oh my gosh, meeting the people and just being reminded day after day after day how good people are, and how much vulnerability is empowering.
Yeah, absolutely.
How it helps people to just live their life to the fullest. Yeah. So you can reach me at AndreaJeanBooking@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I knew this was going to be amazing. I did. I honestly did, because like I said, I've been following you ever since I met you. Kind of met you back at that Recovery One convention. But you're amazing, and I do appreciate your vulnerability and willing to share such a tender story that's obviously near and dear to your heart. But man, I feel inspired. It makes me want to be better. And I know people listening to this are going to feel the exact same way.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for everything that you're doing too. I think that you are profoundly inspiring. And when you reached out to me, I thought, yes, absolutely.
Oh, good.
I think your story is incredible too. And I'm just grateful for your contribution to the addiction community, and for the way that you just are keeping the conversation going, because that's really what it's about. So,
well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Well, listeners, there you go, man. Another amazing story. And I know you're inspired right now. Please share this with someone you know who maybe feels hopeless. Maybe if they don't even believe in God or whatever, this may help spark them to go in that direction, to get past their victim stance. And please share this, and I do always, try to let everybody know that, and Andrea and I were talking about this before we got on, is that there's nothing wrong with you.
No.
And we say this a lot. I have a quote on my wall, the most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. And I bring that up again because I see what you went through, and look what you're doing with it. And there's nothing wrong with you because you went through it.
Nope.
And now here you are, just giving hope to so many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That was
so
good.
Thank you.
Well, listeners, thank you for listening. Please know how much I love you, and I love your support. And I'm grateful once again to be able to have someone amazing like Andrea come on and share her story. Until next time.